Living at home with my folks till I was 25 wasn't something I planned out like some strategy, it just felt right, you know? We were tight, like, really tight. Some folks get antsy to bolt the moment they hit 18, but not me. My parents' place was more than just a house, it was home in the realest sense. Didn't see much point in changing that. Then, life threw a curveball. Losing them both to the pandemic felt like someone ripped the ground right out from under me. Suddenly, I was staring at this gaping hole in my life, trying to figure out what comes next. They left me enough money to coast for a while, but the thought of just living off their hard work felt off. It didn't sit right with me. So, I made up my mind to pull myself together. Wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. The whole idea of diving into the job market, of being truly on my own for the first time, was daunting. But the alternative? Living in a bubble, pretending I didn't need to grow up. That wasn't an option. Not anymore. Finding a job wasn't a walk in the park either. Ended up landing a gig as a manager at this trading company. The work was a whole new world for me, but I dug my heels in, determined to make it work. Gotta start somewhere, I told myself, over and over. I remember running into an old friend from school, Jake, while I was out grabbing lunch one day. He spotted me first. "Hey, isn't that the home bird, Emily? Still living in your folks' nest?" he teased, a smirk playing on his lips. His words stung, more than I wanted to admit. I squared my shoulders, facing him head-on. "Actually, Jake, I'm managing on my own now. Got a job and everything," I shot back, the words laced with a mix of pride and defiance. "Oh, look at you, all grown up and independent. Never thought I'd see the day," he laughed, but there was no real warmth in it. "Yeah, well, people change. Things happen. You learn to stand on your own 2 feet," I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. The conversation felt like walking through a minefield, each word carefully chosen, but loaded. Jake shrugged, the conversation clearly not going the way he expected. "Fair enough. Good for you, Emily. Really." We parted ways shortly after, the encounter leaving a sour taste in my mouth. It was a reminder of how far I'd come, sure, but also of how much further I had to go. That night, as I sat alone in the quiet of the house that used to be filled with my parents' laughter, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was fear, yeah, but also a budding sense of determination. I was on a path they'd never get to see, forging a new life from the remnants of the old. The chill in the air wasn't just from the December cold, it was my first holiday season without my folks. The Christmas sale crowd was a mix of frantic and festive, a sharp contrast to my own numb wandering. That's when I bumped into him, literally. "Ouch. Watch it," I started, more out of surprise than pain. Sorry, my fault entirely," he replied, catching a box of Christmas ornaments before it hit the ground. "This crowd is wild, huh?" He was about my age, with a look of earnest concern that quickly changed to a sheepish grin. "I'm Alex," he said, extending a hand not holding runaway Christmas decor. "Emily," I responded, taking his hand briefly. Yeah, it's madness. Christmas shopping always turns into a contact sport. Alex laughed, and it was an easy, genuine sound. "You're not wrong. I'm just trying to find something for my mom. She loves these handmade ornaments, but I'm clueless." Looking at the box he almost dropped, I picked one up. "These are nice. Look, this one's got intricate designs. Bet she'd love it." We moved through the stalls together, talking about everything and nothing. Alex was easy to talk to, a breath of fresh air in the midst of holiday chaos. "So, Emily, what brings you here? Looking for anything in particular?" he asked, as we paused by a stall selling handmade scarves. "Just trying to feel, I don't know, festive, I guess? My parents, well, it's just me now. Holidays feel different," I confessed, surprised at my own honesty. Alex's expression softened. "I get that. Holidays, they can be tough. But hey, we find new ways to make them ours, right? Yeah, right. I agreed, finding comfort in his understanding. We ended up spending the afternoon together, finding gifts and sharing stories. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows between the stalls, Alex turned to me. Hey, Emily, would you maybe want to grab a coffee? As a thank you for helping me survive this shopping ordeal and, well, for the company, he suggested, hopeful but clearly trying to play it cool. I thought about it. My instinct was to retreat, to go back to my quiet, solitary world. But something about Alex, his easy kindness, and his understanding, made me want to say yes. Sure, Alex. I'd like that. Coffee sounds perfect, I replied, feeling a spark of something warm in the cold evening air. As we walked toward the nearest cafe, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would mark the beginning of something new. Not just surviving, but maybe starting to live again. A couple of months down the line, Alex decided it was high time I met his folks. I was a bundle of nerves, hoping to make a good impression. Their welcome was polite, but I could feel the chill through their smiles. We were barely through the door when the questioning started. It was like stepping into the ring, except I wasn't prepared for this kind of bout. So, dear, Alex tells us you lost your parents recently. That must have been tough, his mom began, her tone soft but probing. Yeah, it was a rough patch. Still is, sometimes, I admitted, fidgeting with the hem of my shirt. The conversation felt too personal, too soon. And what about work? Alex mentioned you're in trading? How's that treating you? His dad chimed in, his curiosity not quite matching the warmth supposed to accompany such questions. It's going good. Keeps me on my toes, I responded, trying to keep the unease out of my voice. Must be quite the lucrative field, eh? What kind of figures are we talking about? His mom's question hit me like a cold splash, too forward, too soon. I glanced at Alex, hoping he'd throw me a lifeline. The look on my face must have said it all, because he quickly jumped in. Mom, Dad, come on, let's not grill her about money. That's not important, Alex said, his tone firm yet respectful. I could have hugged him right then. Despite his intervention, the evening carried an undercurrent of unease. After we left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't measured up to their expectations. In the car, the silence was heavy until I couldn't take it anymore. Alex, do you think your parents didn't like me? The words tumbled out, laced with worry. Alex took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Hey, don't worry about it. They're just protective, you know? Give it some time. They'll see how amazing you are, just like I do. His words were meant to comfort, and a part of me wanted to believe them. But the doubt lingered, a shadow on what should have been a straightforward step forward in our relationship. Settling into married life at my place was like a dream for the first 6 months. Me and Alex, we were in our little bubble of happiness. Sure, his mom, Mrs. Thompson, didn't exactly warm up to me, always poking at my cooking, my cleaning, even how I dressed. But since they lived a good drive away, those jabs were few and far between. We managed. Then one evening, Alex came home looking like he'd lost his best friend. Babe, I've got to head out of town for work. 2 whole months, he said, barely meeting my eyes. My heart sank. 2 months? That's ages, Alex. What about us? He ran a hand through his hair, stress written all over his face. I know. It's the last thing I want, but I don't have a choice. And there's more, my mom's in the hospital. Heart problems. Hearing that about Mrs. Thompson, despite our rocky relationship, I couldn't help but feel worried. Oh, Alex, I'm so sorry. Is she okay? They're not sure yet. She might need surgery, he replied, his voice cracking a bit. Without a second thought, I said, I'll look after her while you're gone. She'll need someone, right? Alex looked at me, a mix of surprise and gratitude in his eyes. You'd do that? After everything? I nodded. Of course. She's your mom. The next day, I took a day off and headed to his parents' place. Mrs. Thompson was already home from the clinic, looking frail, but stubborn as ever. "Emily, what are you doing here?" she asked, eyeing me like I might steal the silver. "I'm here to help out. Alex is worried about you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She huffed, settling back into her chair. "Well, I don't need babysitting, especially not by you." I bit back a sharper reply. "I know you don't. But I'm here to help, with cooking, cleaning, whatever you need." Mrs. Thompson squinted at me, as if trying to figure out my angle. "Fine. But I like my meals on time and my house spotless. And don't think you can dress like a slob here." I forced a smile. "Understood." Those weeks turned into a trial by fire. I cooked, cleaned, and did my best to keep things running smoothly, all under Mrs. Thompson's critical eye. Every dish I made was either too salty or too bland, every room I cleaned missed some speck of dust only she could see. One evening, as I was scrubbing the kitchen counter for what felt like the 10th time, she walked in, watching me like a hawk. "You missed a spot," she said, pointing to a corner so far back it would require me to grow an extra arm to reach it without moving everything off the counter. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm doing the best I can," I said, my patience wearing thin. She snorted. "Clearly, your best isn't good enough." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. Alex was counting on me, and I wasn't about to let him down, no matter how much his mother pushed my buttons. "Is there anything else you need before I go to bed?" I asked, keeping my tone polite. "Just make sure you're up early to start breakfast. And try not to burn the eggs this time," she replied, turning on her heel and leaving me to my thoughts. Life at my in-laws became more of a boot camp than a recovery ward pretty fast. Every day, it was like waking up to a new list of demands from my mother-in-law. And every evening, I juggled my job and her endless requests that just piled up, one on top of the other. "Can you fetch me the remote?" "It's just there on the coffee table," Mrs. Thompson would say, pointing at an object mere inches from her hand. The first few times, I didn't mind. But then, it became a routine, her asking for things she clearly could get herself. Cooking dinner turned into a tactical mission, trying to remember all of her dietary whims. "I only eat organic greens, you know. And the chicken needs to be cooked just so," she'd instruct, her voice carrying that tone that said any deviation would be unacceptable. Evenings, the only time I could catch my breath, were hijacked by the blaring TV. Mr. Thompson had a thing for action movies, the louder, the better. There I was, exhausted, trying to find some peace, but instead, getting a front row seat to explosions and car chases. "You know, Emily, ever since you married my son, my health has just gone downhill," Mrs. Thompson threw at me one evening, out of nowhere. Her words stung, especially since I was bending over backward, trying to make her life easier. I tried to keep my cool, but it was getting tougher. "I'm really trying my best here, Mrs. Thompson. I don't see how my being with your son is causing your health issues." Her lips pursed into a thin line, clearly displeased. "Well, if you can't see it, I'm not sure how much help you are here." I was at my wit's end, dreaming of my own bed, my own kitchen, my sanctuary. But then, Alex called. "Babe, I'm so sorry, but I'm stuck here for another 2 months. The project's just not wrapping up as we expected." Hearing his voice, tired and strained, I wanted to be strong, to not add to his stress. "It's okay, Alex. We'll manage somehow," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Are you sure? Mom's not giving you a hard time, is she?" he asked, worry creeping into his voice. I paused, not wanting to worry him, but honesty won out. "It's been challenging. But I'm handling it. Focus on your work, love. We'll sort this out when you get back." After hanging up, I realized this was my battle to fight, at least for now. Mrs. Thompson and her demands, the never-ending noise, the blame, it was all on me to bear. But I couldn't help but wonder, how much longer could I keep this up? The strain at home hit a peak when Mrs. Thompson had another heart scare and ended up needing surgery. It was serious enough that I called Alex in a panic, and he rushed back home. Seeing him was a relief, but it was short-lived because work pulled him away again. After the surgery, things at home didn't get any easier. Mrs. Thompson came back needing more care than before. It was like looking after a child. She wanted help with everything, eating, dressing, you name it. And Mr. Thompson? He was no help at all. Instead of appreciating the effort, he complained, "You're always out. I end up cooking for both of us. What are we, chopped liver?" Then, Mrs. Thompson started with her threats, saying she'd tell Alex I was neglecting her, hinting he should leave me. "He'll listen to his mother. You'll see," she'd hiss, as if I wasn't already stretched to my limit. My patience was wearing thin, like an old pair of jeans about to tear at the seams. Mrs. Thompson's demands grew by the day, each one more unreasonable than the last. It felt like I was living in a pressure cooker, waiting for the whistle to blow. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Mrs. Thompson in the living room, a scowl set deep on her face. "Where have you been? I've been waiting for you to start dinner," she snapped as soon as I walked through the door. "I had to stay late at work, Mrs. Thompson. I'm sorry." "I'll start on dinner right away," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite my frustration. "And make sure it's edible this time." "Last night's dinner was a disaster," she retorted, turning her attention back to the TV, which was, as usual, blaring at an ear-splitting volume. I wanted to scream, to let out all the frustration and exhaustion I'd been bottling up inside. Instead, I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly as I began to prepare dinner. 2 weeks passed like that, and my obnoxious ward should have fully recovered by now. However, Mrs. Thompson remained weak. One day I got off work early. I was tiptoeing into the house, hoping for a quiet afternoon, but what I found was anything but. There was my mother-in-law, lively as can be, chattering away on the phone like she was at some high tea party. Yeah, I've got her wrapped around my finger. Just a little act here and there, and she jumps. Does everything for me. Even the little things I can do myself, she boasted to her friend, her laughter echoing off the walls. I stood there, frozen, key still in hand. The realization hit me like a truck. All this time, her needing help, her pain, a good chunk of it was just an act. A manipulative play to have me wait on her hand and foot. The anger bubbled up inside me, hot and fierce. I stepped into the room, unable to hold back. "Really, now? Is that how it is? Putting on a show so I do more for you?" I confronted her, my voice hard, the words tumbling out. She turned, the phone still clutched to her ear, her face a mix of shock and guilt. For a moment, she looked like she was caught in the headlights, then, quick as a flash, her demeanor changed. "Oh, you're home. Look at the time," she said into the phone, brushing off our confrontation like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. This was a game changer. I realized then that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. Not because I wasn't doing it right, but because the goalposts were always moving. "I can't believe you," I finally said, the disappointment heavy in my voice. "I've been breaking my back for you, and this is how you repay me? By lying? By manipulating?" Her response was cold, calculated. "I'm just making sure you're doing your part. After all, you married into this family. It's your duty." I didn't want to fight, but I couldn't let this go. "I've had it, Mrs. Thompson. I'm leaving this house," I said, my resolve hardening. Before I knew it, she was on her feet, fury in her steps as she snatched my phone from the kitchen counter. She stormed outside, and I followed, only to watch in disbelief as she threw it under the car, smashing it. "Let's see you call for help now," she sneered, her actions betraying her desperation. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, not just for the phone, but for the sheer breakdown of respect. I started gathering my things, determined to leave. But she wasn't done. She followed, throwing my clothes and personal items out after me, shouting insults that stung deeper than the cold air. "You're nothing. You don't deserve to be part of this family." I was outside, picking up my things and trying to hold back tears when Alex arrived. The sight of his car was both a relief and a harbinger of the confrontation to come. "What's going on here?" Alex demanded, his eyes darting between his mother standing at the doorway and me, a mess on the driveway. "She's crazy, Alex. She's been lying about how sick she is. And now this." I gestured to the scattered belongings and my destroyed phone. His gaze shifted to his mother, searching for a denial that didn't come. "Mom? Is this true?" Mrs. Thompson's facade crumbled, but her defiance didn't. "She was never good enough for you, never good enough for our family." Walking into his parents' house, Alex was a storm dressed in human skin. His face was set, his jaw tight, ready to confront the hurricane his parents had brewed. "I can't believe what I've been hearing and seeing. How could you?" Alex started, his voice heavy with disappointment and anger. His mom, Mrs. Thompson, shot back. "Oh, now you're going to believe her over your own mother? She's turned you against us, filled your head with lies." "That's enough, Mom." Alex's voice cut through her accusations like a knife. "I've seen the videos. I've heard the recordings. I've heard enough of your words about her. There's no denying what you've done." The color drained from Mrs. Thompson's face as realization sank in. Her bravado faltered, her usual sharp tongue suddenly heavy in her mouth. "And you?" Alex turned to his father. "You just stood by? You let this happen?" Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably, the guilt evident in his avoidance to meet his son's gaze. Alex continued, his disappointment unwavering. "Did you know that she sold her parents' house to pay for your wife's operation? Because the insurance wouldn't cover it all? We were planning to build a new house, a place where we could all live together. But not anymore." The room went silent, the weight of Alex's words pressing down on everyone. Mrs. Thompson, tears streaming down her face, reached out. "Please, I didn't know. I can change. We can forget all this happened." But Alex was resolute. "It's too late for that. You've shown us who you really are. We're done here. I'm done." Mr. Thompson, realizing the magnitude of their loss, turned to his wife with a look of betrayal. "You foolish woman. You've ruined everything." As Alex and I walked out to the car, the finality of the situation settled in. We were leaving behind more than just a house, we were severing ties with a part of our lives that had turned toxic. Sitting in the car, about to start a new chapter, Alex took my hand. "I'm sorry it had to be this way. But we're going to start fresh, just the two of us." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. "Together," I affirmed, squeezing his hand back. We drove off, leaving behind the chaos, ready to build a new life on our terms, grounded in truth and respect, away from the shadows of manipulation and deceit. A month flew by, and finally, our new house was ready, a real beauty, if I do say so myself. Me and Alex, we put our hearts into making it a home, picking out every piece with care, making sure it all felt like us. We hadn't spoken to his folks since that day. Heard through the grapevine that his dad up and left, found someone new, leaving Mrs. Thompson to fend for herself in some small apartment. She tried reaching out, wanted to patch things up, but for us, that ship had sailed. Some wounds are too deep for sorries to heal. One evening, as we settled into our new living room, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked, Alex looked over at me with a smile that always made my heart skip. "So, babe, how do you feel about starting a family here?" he asked, his voice casual, but eyes filled with hope. I paused, the question hanging in the air like a promise. "A baby, here, with you? That sounds like the dream, Alex." He reached for my hand, his touch grounding. "I think we're ready to make new memories, good ones, in this place we built together." I nodded, the future suddenly blooming before us, filled with possibilities. "It'll be amazing. Our own little family." "Yeah," Alex agreed, a softness in his voice. Our own fresh start, away from all the drama. Just us and a new beginning. As we sat there, planning for a future filled with laughter and love, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. Despite the rocky road that led us here, we were building something beautiful on our own terms.